Hello, everybody, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Thursday, the 11th of September. I'm really glad this didn't fall on a Friday because it certainly wouldn't be a feel good Friday. This is that day every year where a lot of us remember the song that Alan Jackson put out 24 years ago. Where were you when the world stopped turning? 24 years ago, I know where I was. I was living in Stratford, and I had gone back on Sunday the 10th. It was a Monday, I believe. Whatever day it was, maybe it was a Tuesday. The night before, anyway, on September 10th, I had gone back to London to stay with my parents because I had a meeting with a member of the Diocese of Huron, a staff member, and she and I were planning a retreat weekend for a parish in Owen Sound, Ontario, and we were getting ready to do that coming up that weekend, the following weekend, and we were going to gather at her office at the church house in London to talk about that and lay out some final plans. So I went down the night before to my parents and stayed there. And next morning, September 11th, I woke up and I turned on the news, made myself a cup of coffee, and I saw the second tower fall. And I remember thinking at first, this is a really bad joke. And never been to New York City. I'd never seen the towers, the Twin Towers. I wasn't really sure what the World Trade Center was or what they were talking about until we started seeing the horrific footage and seeing the firefighters and the police and what was happening to people on the ground. I remember my mom was working nights and she was sound asleep. And I remember staying there as long as I could and when thinking she needs to wake up because she can't wake up and find out about this. My dad was going to be away. And so eventually I had to leave. So I had to leave her a note on the table explaining what had happened and that this was real. And when I got to Marianne's office at Church House, they had all the phones connected to the news, and you could hear through the speakerphones CBC, the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, sharing what little news they had. And we all know there wasn't much news happening throughout the day, just repetition over and over of what they knew for sure. And we all know then after that what happened. I remember that day I had a parishioner who he was a pilot for Air Canada, and his wife was brave and strong, but she was waiting and waiting to find out because all flights had been detained, and I believe he was heading for Calgary. But there was radio silence. No one knew where he was, what was happening. And I remember when she I think either she called or I ran into or something. But when we found out that he was in Calgary or Chicago or wherever it was he was, but he was safe and she could breathe. She knew he wasn't the pilot for those flights, but we didn't know what else was going on. Another parishioner I found out later in the week, her husband was a truck driver, and he was driving a truck through the Holland Tunnel when everything stopped. And for hours and hours and hours, she heard nothing. And she knew her husband was going to be delivering his trailer into New York City. And I can only imagine now, 24 years later, having been married now for 20 years, what those moments must have felt like for her, the not knowing. We watched the world change completely. On the news, we saw people in the Middle East, celebrating because of what had happened to the great United States. That is not what they were calling them. We watched Canada do what Canada does. As members of our own firefighters, we had members of our policing, we had people volunteering to go to New York City to do the work that needed to be done. We had people receiving people. Remember Gander? What happened in Gander, Newfoundland? In the people of Newfoundland and Labrador became famous because of Gander. The flights that were redirected there, the people who took total strangers into their homes. Because that is what Canadians do when the world stops turning. We even now have a musical about it, Come From Away, to talk about how incredible the people of Gander were and the work that was done on of on behalf of humanity, simply stepping up and saying, "What do you need?" The world changed that day. For a long time, it looked like the world wasn't going to change for the better, but eventually it did. Canada learned that we can still be proud of our military, as men and women of many different ages went to serve in Afghanistan and some in Iraq. As people, families back home waited, and we saw, if I'm not mistaken, 156 caskets come back draped in the Canadian flag. Lives changed, countries changed, politics changed 24 years ago when the world stopped turning. And now, after all the lessons we have learned, after all of the things we have discovered that we can do in a new way, the ways that we can reach out to people in peace and learn ways to discover who we are as members of creation together, we've learned over the years that war doesn't work. We have learned that we can be compassionate, that we can try a new thing. And yet, in the past couple of years, we have discovered that those lessons were not universally learned. We are watching as Russia continues to attack Ukraine, and Ukraine continues to stand up for herself. A people that no one expected would fight back or would be able to fight back continue to fight back, even though the world seems to no longer be watching. We are watching as Hamas attacked Israel and Israel attacked Gaza, and Palestinians and Israelis are killed. And yet Hamas and Israel continue to fight, fighting over ground that should be hallowed, over places where Jesus walked, over the Palestine that is mentioned in the Bible. And yet the war continues. And now we are watching as that country that was attacked 24 years ago today seems to be attacking itself. I am not trying to be political. I am not trying to wave a flag for one thing or another. I'm just asking that maybe today we could all pray for peace, that we could all pray for common sense and the recognition that every single person born is made in the image of God, regardless of where they've come from, regardless of where they hope to go, regardless of whether they have billions or they have nothing. The world has changed in 24 years. Today, the world still turns, even though for a day or a while, a month or a year, it felt as if the world stopped turning 24 years ago. The world has indeed begun to turn again, but is it turning in the right way? We need to learn the lessons that we learned on September 11th, 2001. We need to learn those lessons and remember them, all of them, including the ones where people came together, where people looked at their neighbor and saw not someone to hate, but someone they'd known and played soccer with and ate donuts with and celebrated Christmas celebrations for their kids at school, for holiday dramas and things like that, holiday pageants, because they recognize that maybe the way that is my way isn't your way, but that doesn't mean we can't find our way. The world is beginning to revolve on itself in a way that we all hoped, I really believe we all hoped that 24 years ago it would never do again. And it has started, and it's spinning faster and faster, and it needs to end. We all need to pray for peace. We all need to pray that all of God's children, wherever they are, will be treated with dignity and integrity and given the opportunity to become all who they're called to be. We all need to pray that those who make decisions, those who have the power, will step down or learn a new way to discover that we need our way. We need a way when we can walk together forward. And it doesn't matter that you have billions of dollars, or you're a tech giant, or you believe in some other system. The truth is, the system we need to believe in is that every child of any race, creed, or color, of any socioeconomic status, is as important as the next. When we can get there, maybe we can move the spinning of our world away from another 9/11. God bless you as you live through this day, as you remember. God bless us all.